Good morning. This is Ed Haravon from Get Real. Welcome to our latest Get Real segment. I'm pleased to be joined by Roy Magnuson, Tony Marinello, and Tim Fredstrom from Illinois State University to talk about some interesting and exciting projects they're doing in immersive technology, and hope that you guys will all benefit from their knowledge as they share it today in their applications of some really exciting technology as we talk more about how the metaverse is penetrating into academia and some of the great use cases it's being brought to for students and for professors alike. So good morning, everybody here. Thanks very much for joining me. Maybe Roy, I'd start with, start with you, Roy, but I'd love to get everybody just give a quick introduction for themselves and kind of what their focus is there at the university.
Yeah, for sure. Hi, thanks for having us. My name is Roy Magnuson. I'm an associate professor at Illinois State University, where I teach music composition in the School of Music, but I also teach virtual reality design in our creative technology program, where I'm serve as the associate director. So I sort of have this dual appointment where I kind of split between, traditional acoustic music theory kind of stuff, but then also, pivot and I'm teaching, more immersive media and, interactivity, Unity design, things like that.
Great. Tim, why don't you introduce yourself?
Thank you. Thanks for having us today. I'm Tim Fredstrom. I teach choral music education. I direct choirs, teach conducting, teach choral pedagogy at Illinois State.
And Tony.
Hi, again, thanks for having us. This is pretty exciting to get to spend the morning with you. My name is Tony Marinello. I serve as director of bands at Illinois State University. And under that umbrella, I oversee every wind band as well as our athletic bands here at Illinois State University. And I'm joined by a couple colleagues who help me with all that. But as far as my academic appointment, I conduct the Wind Symphony, which is our top wind ensemble here, and also spend a good bit of time teaching undergraduate conducting, as well as leading our graduate conducting program for wind conducting.
Well, that's great. Thank you all for joining us today. I want to start with you, Roy. Just, one of the first conversations we had in the last month was we really were drawn to some of the unique ways that, frankly, no one at Get Real had seen for leveraging VR technology. And it was very unique application towards music and conducting and such. And so could you give us I know that blossomed into the Solstice VR project, but could you give us a little background of how that started and maybe how it took flight there at the university and in your own journey with it?
Yeah, for sure. So originally, 3 years ago, 4 years ago at this point, I guess, when I started doing VR development, I was really interested in creating virtual spaces for making music. And that started off as this project that became Solstice VR, which is a sort of audio composition sandbox. Like you can go into a 3D space and write music, you can bring in your own samples, record what you're hearing, leverage the physics and sort of spatial audio of a game engine like Unity, and then do things in a virtual space that you just can't do in a real space, like in a DAW or in actual reality. And through that project, I learned a lot about just presence and sort of embodiment and how sound works in VR and the different things that you can leverage. And I think it was 2018 or 2019, it was summer 2019, that I was experimenting with hand tracking and a leap motion in my office. And I kind of was just playing around with this idea of putting, trails on your hands and like, can you create sort of effects and stuff like that? And it occurred to me, it's like, oh, if you do this, you can visualize conducting patterns, right? You could sort of show what is happening, sort of what you're doing as a conductor, and you can see the sort of after image almost. I thought it was kind of cool. It's like, oh, this is neat. And I, sent a note to Tim and to Tony because we're such good friends. It's like, hey, I'm in my basement office messing around with things. Like, come check this out. And they both came in, and I remember just sitting in my office. They threw on the headsets. I think it might have been Tim's first time ever trying VR, and the response was like, I think we're on to something here. Like, this is cool. The ability to get immediate visual feedback of your conducting and to have that, create that loop, right? Of the visual and then the audio and then the visual and the audio, and to get a truly novel application of pedagogy. So that sort of started there. And, we went through, 2019, and we kind of developed an IRB. We were getting ready to do this whole thing with an Oculus Rift S and a Leap Motion, and then we were like literally second week of March in 2020, we're set up to do our first clinical trial, and obviously everything shut down. And in hindsight, it's like one of the best things that could have happened to the project, I think, because it allowed us to kind of take a breath, step back, let the hardware mature a little bit. And we sort of pivoted to the Quest 2 platform, and now have this whole kind of pedagogy and hardware software combination in Ribbons VR that allows for not only like this immersive kind of conducting pedagogy, but also one that is easily shared, right? The Quest is such an aggressively priced device that there's the possibility for students to have access to this instead of like the kind of enterprise level school purchase thing. So for me, all of my stuff as a composer, my involvement has been as the developer and kind of creating the excerpts. But I'll pass it to Tim and Tony. I mean, they are the ones that have been doing the pedagogy and application side of it. Like, how does this transfer from something that I'm kind of experimenting with in my office to actually being applicable, right? It's something that can be used in the real world.
Yeah, that's a great point. So besides it being really unique and novel and really caught our eye, I'd love maybe for Tim and Tony to start weighing in more on the practical use case of like what problems does this solve for you as an educator, as a musician, as a teacher. What is made easier, and what are kind of some of the possibilities that have been open to you because of this application of technology that weren't really there beforehand?
Let me take a stab at it, Tony, and then I'll pass it on. One of the challenges in teaching conducting is getting things concrete enough so students can actually see and experience what we're telling them. So I may have a student who I'm saying, I don't think this pattern looks right. It's not reading right to me visually as I'm watching you. But until they can have concrete feedback, it is very difficult for them to know how to adjust those things. So traditionally, and I've been at this a long time, we use mirrors and we said, watch yourself. Well, that has some disconnect in the fact that it's not as immediate. And then when I could take my iPhone and record them and then they watch it, that was huge. But it still was not that immediacy that we have in VR. So in VR, they actually can see themselves shaping and getting that immediate feedback in the moment, which we have never been able to do, to my knowledge, before as we teach in conducting. So that's one of the really exciting things about this project, that it is, and we call it a new technology for a new generation, and a new pedagogy for a new generation as we're teaching students to be conductors. Tony, you want to pick up from there?
Yeah, so I think Tim hit it on the head. I kind of have started beta testing this all the way back into the spring, and a lot this fall. And to piggyback off what Tim said about how we've traditionally taught conducting, I can say to a student, I want you to watch yourself in the mirror, right? But there's still a personal visual bias, right? If I tell you you're going too far one way or the other, it's, yeah, okay, I guess so. But the great part about this is that it doesn't lie. I mean, like, you can't mess with it. You see exactly the motion you made. And a lot of people, there's been articles read, and I have non-musician friends who are very kind, but like, I know in the back of their mind, when they see me conduct a concert, they're like, what are you really doing up there? Like, what? Come on, like, you're just waving your hands. What's the big deal? Do they even need you? And what we're trying to get across is that at its fundamental level, and I think most musicians would agree with this, is that conducting is about creating predictability in the patterns that you make. And if you're predictable, when you change those parameters, then you're saying something. That's a visual communication in the moment that you hope elicits a response. And that's really at the end of the day, we're teaching students. And so what this technology was great at was helping students set a really clear baseline of how to look and be incredibly clear so that then they knew how to manipulate those patterns and communicate more effectively. And it made those kind of like ethereal, esoteric, ideas of like communicate this or be that or whatever. It put it in black and white motions. I mean, it's you either went this many centimeters past or you didn't. It's very clear in that way. And I'll give you a little story that was great. I had taught 2 semesters of conducting with a bunch of undergraduate students. And then that next semester, a few of them were still on campus, but weren't taking conducting classes. They were done with that. They were just finishing up their degrees. And I said, would you come into my office? We've got this new virtual reality thing. And of course, they were super excited about it. And sure enough, like each one of these students had little inconsistencies in their patterns that I had probably told them about 100 times through the previous semester and never really got fixed, right? And as soon as they put the headset on, it was like this moment of clarity where they went, oh, wow, I really am going too far out on 3. And you're like, I've been saying that for months, So to me, that was like an aha moment. So the cool part was this fall, we worked over the summer and took what I normally did in my conducting class, and Roy designed kind of a parallel set of units to go with it. And we had students do what we had always done and break into groups. And while some were doing what we traditionally did in class, the others were doing the same exact exercises in VR and doing it through this Ribbons VR, and then comparing those 2 experiences. And the initial feedback from students, as well as my assessment of what students were doing, was that they got to much more clarity and a better ability to communicate and do what they need to do as conductors much more quickly, excuse me.
That's fascinating. I wanted to focus in on the students for a sec for anyone to talk. When you first brought a headset into a class, did people look at you like you were crazy? Did they think it was video game time? Would love to know kind of like the engagement around the students to embrace something new in their classwork.
It was like bright eyes. I mean, they were just ready to go. And some of them were already asked, can I get it? I already have a headset. Can I have it? Like they already wanted. It was like, well, let's not let it out just yet. This is not that we don't trust you to, we don't think you're going to go sell it on the black market or the deep web or something, but we're not ready to put it out in the world yet. But man, they took to it like a duck to water. I mean, and they were excited about this. And I think it really started to make their classroom experience more relevant to their real life, and to their real world and how they're interacting with the world outside of the classroom, where they're now doing some of that inside the classroom.
What about talk a little bit about whenever I've talked to people in kind of trying to employ unique technology in education and higher education especially, talk to me about the administration or people that you're talking to get, whether it be for funding or for grants, or to talk about the program, and that can be obviously there's a lot of different priorities at the administrative level. Can you talk a little bit about what some of the feedback has been organizationally at Illinois State to support such a successful program rollout?
Yeah, I mean, I could speak just a little bit, and then I know my colleagues will have thoughts as well. It's been really good. I think ISU is supportive in general of research. I think especially if you're trying to do something novel and you seem very excited about it, like you have the energy to make something happen. And I think that's absolutely true of the School of Music and College of Fine Arts. We've been fortunate to receive several different internal funding streams through university research grants and funding through our Center for Teaching, Learning, Technology. Really, honestly, just to support hardware, because it's expensive to get up to speed for development if you're coming into this project where like Tim and Tony, right? They have batons. Like, I mean, it's like, that's the hardware you purchase for the class, right? To say, okay, we need 5 quests, we need like a laptop that we can be able to take to class, we need to be able to take it to like floor demos at like conferences, and specifically be able to like edit stuff if like, what if something goes wrong? Like in the demo, we need to be able to clean it really fast and rebuild it and put it on a headset in like, 20 minutes. That's to be able to have all of that stuff provided has been huge. And I think it also, for me, just speaks to like the excitement the university has, right? When you see the willingness to, financially back a project, it gives that kind of like edge to it. You're like, okay, like this is real. Like keep pushing, like keep going, see where this can go.
We also have been given time to work on things. Next fall, my teaching load is going to change a little bit to where I'll be teaching specifically the class we're targeting this material for myself. So I did some switching with a colleague, so I could actually be really hands-on in the curricular side of this. And the curriculum dimension of VR is a very unique part where it's not just great technology, which is really cool, but it is really strategically employing the technology in a curriculum and in learning experiences that are very systematic, that are very developmental. And that's kind of a unique piece with technology. Often in educational technology, we have great bells and whistles, but we don't have the underpinning of a instructional model. And that's where our team is unique in that we have specialists in each of these areas that all speak each other's language to pretty well. And we can work together in a great synergistic partnership. And so that's kind of exciting too.
We always see that with our clients as people are trying to adopt new technology, and there's so much happening right now as this metaverse expansion, which we'll talk about later, has occurred, and the proliferation of hardware and some of the world's largest companies backing that hardware and the software expansion that's happened underneath. But technology for technology's sake, which I think is what you're getting at, Tim, is just that. It's not going to stick. It's not going to last for more than a few minutes. It's a sugar high, if you will. But what that integration piece of how do you make it work for you in this case in the curriculum? I'd be interested to know, like, what's an example of kind of integrating into the curriculum, either Tim or Tony or Roy, like that gets beyond that. Hey, this is cool. Kids love putting on a headset. This isn't my nose piled in a book or looking at videos, but like, what's an example of that really kind of locking in to kind of get to a core teaching function?
Hey, Tim, can I start on that one? Because I think this might progress well. When it first started and we first, back in the spring, it was a complete sandbox. You know what I mean? Just get in there and see what you do. And then we use some of that feedback from students to go, okay, what can we do with this? And then the fall, when we started kind of soft implementing it, like I said earlier, it just ran in parallel to what we already did traditionally, right? And then that gave us a lot of information of going, okay, what can this technology actually really do? And then the beauty part was then after we got through this first semester of kind of just, it was kind of a hybrid between a sandbox and with a little bit of loose instruction, with some parameters that would, and then with that information, Tim was really the genius to say, okay, this is how we completely reorganize it. So I felt like this fall, I was just taking this new technology and then kind of jamming it onto the way we traditionally taught. And then that gave us the experience to take a step back. And Tim was really great at saying, okay, let's not teach the same way with this new technology. Let's find a whole new way to now use this technology in a way, in a novel way. And that's really specific to this technology. And he's done a marvelous job of organizing that.
Well, thank you, Tony. That's nice. And I think to follow on that, we're looking really at how do we create these habits of good conducting, and how do we habituate skills so students do predictable conducting. As Tony said earlier, we've got to have very consistent and predictable demonstration of gesture. And then from that, we vary, and that's how we actually conduct. And it's that variation from the predictable that allows for the expressiveness to come from the podium and then eventually to the ensembles of performers. So our curriculum is really focused on developing habits and predictable gesture that then we build on to teach students the variation of the gesture. That is what, in all the years I've taught conducting, I've not been able to do. We kind of bypass the step of the habituation, and we just start going right into, well, now you need to vary it, but we don't tell them from what we are varying. And that is the unique piece of Ribbons VR. It's a totally different mindset as a teacher, and it's a different experience for the students because we are shaping first before we are conducting. So we teach the skills, then we move them into the application of the skills in a very systematic way.
That's great. Thanks for adding some of that color around kind of how that fits into the curriculum and what you're seeing. And it's great to hear how the program has developed from pure experimentation and more structure and continues to do so as more people get exposed to it. I want to go back down just a little bit on the underlying technology. Maybe I could look to you, Roy. Give us a few little like technical platforms. What's the program? What's Ribbons built on? And maybe some challenges and that you've encountered and overcome along the way to kind of building this application as it sits today.
Yeah, sure. So it's built in Unity. That's the main engine that I'm comfortable with. I sort of can dabble in Unreal, but I've done almost all my work in Unity. And like I said, we started on an open VR concept. So I think it was actually the Vive for our very first one, and then we switched to the Oculus Rift S, then to Quest, then to Quest 2. And we sort of kind of entirely pivoted to Quest 2 at this point. And we use the MRTK, the Mixed Reality Toolkit, as our interaction system in the engine, which is just a great set of tools to get some of the hand gesture kind of interactive stuff baked in. Some of the challenges have been really, for me as a designer who's largely learning how to do this by doing it, like, which has been fun and exciting and maddening, as you can imagine, have been to continually focus and to not try to put in as many different branching paths as possible. To make sure it's like we're teaching this concept, right? We need to do this thing, and that sounds really easy, but it's really hard, like to at least for me, from a user experience standpoint, to like really hone in on that. And then some of the performative aspects of working for the Quest. I mean, it's an Android system, right? It's extraordinarily powerful for what it is, but it has a lot of physical limitations with computation. So for some of the interactive music playback, for example, right? The sort of you conduct, and as your conducting changes, the music will respond to you. Well, there's only a few different ways. There are a lot of ways that one could do that in a virtual space, but there's like real trade-offs, like for CPU, bandwidth for doing them in certain ways, and how you kind of do that in different loops and in code and stuff like that. So that was a lot to kind of figure out and just kind of tweak and to get it so the code gives a seemingly natural feel, like, to the person that's conducting. It's impossible to recreate reality, and we're really not trying to do that, but we want to have that sort of like immediate sort of auditory feedback, that if you're slowing down, the music's going to slow down, and you realize you're slowing down because the music is slowed down. Like that is very real. And then the real recent innovation has been the ability to have the mixed reality component for the Quest 2. So using their I think it's like the Presence platform is what they call it, like their pass-through API has been amazing. Just to kind of get the idea of augmented reality at a $300 price point is just completely bananas. So like having the ability, like in Tim's learning path, to actually have a moment where students are still wearing a headset, conducting, seeing their visual feedback, but conducting real people, right? Is that the fidelity is high enough that they can do that is incredible. So you can be, have this one more step where you're conducting, you're getting all the visual feedback, you're still wearing the headset, you're responding to real humans, and then you can take the headset off and conduct without the feedback with the real humans. So that's more or less the path that we've gone through. As a designer, as I said, it's been a real challenge, but a fun challenge, to continually learn with the tech as it's been progressing and to try to figure out how to optimize it to fit this specific use case.
You touched on it there, but I want to give it just a chance for everybody else to respond. Certainly we're on an innovation cycle path for, Quest or other standalone headsets that they're just going to get more powerful. The computing power is going to get better. They're going to get cheaper. Just same way we saw cell phones 20 years ago, and smartphones just kind of go through that cycle. And that's great. And you mentioned leveraging some of the pass-through, which is a super powerful feature of Quest 2. But ultimately, I wanted to get a specific read on where does this device go as we see augmented reality glasses come into play? And while they're starting to be out there with Facebook Stories and Facebook Aria, or now Meta Aria, the project that's out there, it seems as if that would be quite an amazing application of the AR technology were it to come to fruition, and you're able to kind of interact with not only the virtual environment that's giving you the cues and monitoring your movements and syncing up with music, but also now the ability to bring in what is the live environment doing and responding to you. So I want to give everybody a chance to weigh in on that concept of how great is that going to be?
I think we don't even know where this is going. And so it's pretty fun to be at this place. So much of what we do in teaching students to be conductors and music educators, which is where I spend much of my time, we do in simulation. We have to simulate a teaching experience with peers, or even going to a simulation in a classroom setting. I can only imagine what will be the possibility in a few years of being able to create even greater simulation that is more real, that has greater potential to give students that feedback and working within a moment. And I'm really excited to see what this can do, and to partner with Roy and Tony on this is really a great thing as we're trying to find those possibilities.
Yeah, the one of the things that was really interesting in December, Tony and I were able to demo the software at the Midwest Band and Orchestra Clinic in Chicago. So we had it at the ISU booth and just had a headset there and a TV up, and people could see people using this little vertical slice that we created. And the reticence of people to use VR was kind of surprising to me, to get a headset on. And I know that's a thing, right? People don't know what it is, and they feel embarrassed.
There's still
scared.
form factor. Is my hair going to get messed up? It's kind of boxy.
Exactly.
Do I look weird while I'm doing it?
Yeah,
there
exactly.
still is a little quickly eroding, but it's still out there. Yeah.
Yeah, the friction. So it's as that begins to erode, as it becomes more and more mainstream, and we saw this, I think, moment at Christmas. It's just like the Quest was the search volume was higher than Xbox, PlayStation, Switch. Like it was. People got them for Christmas. They were sold. Yeah. So it's getting there, right? When that continues, and I think coupled with the sort of form factor getting lighter, and then just color pass through. If there's a lighter, slightly more comfortable, not quite all day device, but something that's 200 or 300 grams that someone could wear, and have that sort of real color pass through. They could read a piece of paper in front of them. I think at that point, you're talking about a thing that could be used not only for pedagogy, but also just in rehearsal, right? You could be using it in front of a group to get metronomes and tuners and feedback and have your notes. And just, there's so many different paths that it could branch off in.
Yeah, I'll kind of back up a little bit and talking about the development side. And it's, I will, sing Roy's praises, because when this first thing started, it was yeah, that's cool. But, when I would keep throwing this stuff, and part of me feels guilty about it, because one of the big things was can you make it so that when I conduct, the music physically, it audibly reacts to my conducting, right? Which before now, I've never seen anything do that. And I actually remember a long time ago, taking my kids to the Children's Museum in New Orleans, where I grew up. And there was a thing sponsored by the Louisiana Philharmonic where it was like, you be the conductor, right? And you stood in front of a music screen. And if you conducted well, then the musicians played well. And if you didn't, the musicians booed you. And so I get up, and I've got 2 degrees at this point in music. I'm like, I'm gonna kill this. And I was awful. I mean, just the musicians booed me every time. And so that was a big thing, was like, I want this needs to be genuinely reactive, as close to what a human reaction would be. If I slow down, they need to slow down, and vice versa. And I mean, that was like a huge gauntlet. And you have no idea how many times Roy and I have been texting. I'm like, what about this? And then it'll be 4 hours later. I figured it out. How? I don't know. I just figured it out. So he has really gone above and beyond. And the crazy part is that as we're saying, can it do this? Can it do that? Can you make it do this? He's then also saying, guys, there's this thing now. Like, and that's how the AR, the mixed reality part of it started. And I will say things were going really cool, and we were doing a lot of cool stuff and having it react to us and and all that stuff. And then when it got to the mixed reality portion, it was like, this is dynamic, because now we're talking about bridging that virtual world into the actual world. And that, I think, as we demoed that on the floor at the Midwest Band and Orchestra Clinic, that was probably the most exciting thing that people saw. Because I think in that moment, as soon as they clicked the button and they saw the real world around them, but then could still see their own ribbons and things like that, that part of the virtual reality platform, that was like, okay, this is a game changer. And I think that moment is when it became less, especially for some of my older compatriots and colleagues in the music world, the younger kids, the college kids that tried it, they were woo, but once that part, they saw that mixed reality, that was like, okay, this is a tool now. I see how this is a tool. So much so that we even had some gentlemen from the Air Force Band, the United States Air Force Band, come and play with it. And they were very interested with it, and kind of pulled Roy aside, talked to him for a while. And they had all kinds of ideas about how to use it. And so I kept joking with them. I was like, hey, before you know it, the Air Force is going to weaponize Ribbons VR. So
it's going out there.
Yeah, exactly.
Into the world. That's all some great insight and some great enthusiasm around kind of the technology. I want to kind of bring it to a close here with a couple final questions, kind of a open-ended, free association piece. And one will seem obvious, but one I want to start with, just to kind of close things with, is, where's it go from here? You guys are all, experienced and accomplished in your fields. I know that you've outlined a very disciplined and thoughtful, purposeful track of how ribbons can evolve and be part of a curriculum, and not just be tech for tech's sake or so. But if you sit there and you let your mind expand around some things you haven't even thought about yet, or another area of your teaching or your curriculum, maybe not specifically related to the conducting piece, where are some thoughts that it could go? I'd love to get your insight on that. Tim, we can start with you.
Okay, well, I think for me, it's really focusing on how do we create learning paths for teaching, conducting, and music education that are appropriate for this generation of learners. It's a different world, and I've taught a long time, and I'm teaching students, and they process the world differently. I am a digital immigrant. They are digital natives. Mm-hmm. They follow and work with technology in a way that is very different than I did. And my pedagogy needs to adapt to this ever-changing world. So for me, that's what I'm thinking about. How do I start to think about this in creating real virtual experiences, or virtual experiences that really create real learning experiences, I think is what I better said. So that's what I'm thinking about. So both with conducting, I'm thinking also what we could do in actually things like classroom management, things like teaching concept formation. What are the experiences we take students through to help them learn and retain understanding and knowledge? So that's what I'm thinking about is kind of the next piece.
Great. Roy.
Yeah, so I mean, my spring is going to be kind of focused on implementing Tim and Tony's curriculum. So we have this learning plan. I have a whole bunch of sub modules I got to figure out how to how to implement, which is fun. It's like these tiny little projects, right? You just you bite off, and then for me, the biggest struggle is honestly having never done a project with scale in a virtual space to make sure I'm implementing them in the right order, and then I'm able to duplicate things when necessary to make things faster and more performative and interactive and all that stuff. So just kind of planning all that out, and then slowly going off one bite at a time. And then we're also planning on releasing the vertical slice that we have now in the app lab with Oculus. So that is going through the first steps right now. We're about to push it over to Oculus to get approval, but should be available for download as long as they are okay with it, available for download in the next couple months. So if you got a Quest, you can go through the sort of on Rails experience that we've created, which leads you through a bunch of the different kind of modules, and it gives you a sense of what the at least the VR side of the curriculum will provide.
It's great. Tony.
Yeah, I think, I think about it in almost different phases. And so like the stuff my colleagues are talking about, I think we're all in agreement. We're really starting to funnel this down, if that makes sense, to a really powerful tool and a really powerful system for this singular application of teaching conducting. Beyond that, we've kind of had like some side ideas of like things this could evolve into later. I'm curious to see how this might impact K through 12 students, right? Students who are involved in music in high schools, especially. We did have a couple high school kids who tried it and got into it, and it was like they were very excited to do it. And because there is, through marching band and even, concert ensembles, there is opportunity for students to conduct, and so I'm curious to see how that can expand to that world. And then on the other end, thinking about me, my own conducting, my own performance, right? Is like, how can this eventually be something to where maybe I'm thinking way too outside the box, but I almost think of it like my phone, right? And the phone has become this immediate access to any information I can think of. And if I've got a piece in my mind right away, I can go, wait, what is that? Who wrote that piece? How does that melody go? Does it go up to an A or an A flat or whatever? Then I can just look on my phone and figure it out. And now I'm thinking about, can that process now be more immediate, through technology? Can I have access to resources in the moment while I'm making music to go, wait, let me pull this up, or what have you. I'm not really sure, it's like, what kind of things can we do, that can be used for graduate conductors, but also practicing advanced conductors. And, so that's something I'm really excited about to see. This may sound oversimplified, but to go either direction from where we are. We're working with collegiate students, like how can this expand outward both ways?
Yeah, certainly things that I'd be interested to hear about, and when we have you back on and to chart your progress here in 6 months' time would be, what some of your colleagues are saying and what their passions are, and whatever form of classroom education they're involved in. They see not only your application of the technology, but the process that you went through, the open sandbox, the development, the rapid innovation, and then starting to focus in on a particular curriculum. Obviously at Get Real, we think that there's incredible possibilities for not only training, both practical job skill, soft skill training, but education as well. This whole idea that you can see in a safe environment, try before you actually have to do in the real world, the repeatability of it, the scalability of it, the cost effectiveness, really, because it's, Tim, you alluded to earlier, recreating those, how many times you can just round up a symphony and practice conducting, and the ability you could do it, 5 times a night, every hour in your dorm room. With a relatively inexpensive piece of hardware, and certainly, as we see, to touch on your point, Tony, these tools, these metaverse hardware tools, whether it be AR glasses or VR headsets, and the form factor will continue to change and evolve. The same way you're traveling around with a phone in your pocket and a laptop in your bag, and you have a desktop, and each of these tools and each of these tools serve their own purpose, and these glasses or the hardware or AR glasses are going to be just another extension, and you'll be popping those on for 10 minutes. You'll be taking them off. You'll be moving over to your computer. You'll be coming back. And we see it as, it's not going to be an all or one. It's not going to take away all these other tools where people will be in headsets for 8 hours a day. That's probably unrealistic. However, you could see people popping them on and taking them off, 10s, 20 times per day as need be. And, we see that for having a meeting or to take a piece of training or to collaborate with colleagues, et cetera. So all great applications of the tools and great ways to envision them evolving, certainly on the education front, but also as we see, to all users as they continue to become more mainstream. So I want to thank everybody for their time this morning. It was really great to hear all the great work that we're doing. We love VR and AR and really now metaverse ambassadors, and Tim, Tony, and Roy, you guys certainly fill that moniker in great ways. And so thank you very much for sharing your story with us today. We look forward to keeping track how things go. Thank you all for your time, and best of luck in the new year. So enjoy.
Thank you.
Thank you.